So the deck is a whopping $75. I think on average these decks have been costing about $75. We do have some cards inside here that are pretty expensive, or on the more expensive side. So this is the Shadrix Silverquill Commander deck. Like I mentioned in the description early, Shadrix makes your opponent stronger. This deck is designed not to care about that. So what we want to do with this commander deck is control combat, like I mentioned earlier on in the stream. And there's some cards that that I'm going to show you right now that does that. So we have Blood Reckoning. Blood Reckoning, whenever our opponent attacks us, they lose 1 life. And then we have this, which is going to give us the Monarch. This is $1. It's $2.29 at Card Kingdom. But Court of Ambition is going to force people to lose life and discard cards, which I think would be nice for us. We have a Court of Grace over here, which is going to give us creatures that, whether it's a 1/1 creature or a 4/4 creature, it's just creatures that are going to allow us to block and potentially not take damage if we give our opponents 2/1 tokens, or we give our opponents +1/+1 counters. It won't matter too much. We have Cunning Rhetoric that's going to, whenever our opponents attack us, we exile the top card of their library and we can play that card. Really just giving our opponents things, but also at the same time incentivizing them not to attack us. We have Feast on the Fallen, so at the beginning of each upkeep, if an opponent lost life that turn, put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control. So this is kind of a hit or miss card over here. Sometimes it works well. Sometimes people see it and immediately remove this card. And I think when you play against it in a lower power level, I think they'll target it with removal much quicker. I just find that Shadrix is a 2/5 with double strike, so essentially he deals 4 damage. And, you know, over the course of, you know, you're giving your opponents creatures. So generally they're going to be attacking, and as that happens, you know, giving Shadrix 1 counter lets him deal 6 damage. Giving him 2 counters is now 8, and so on and so forth. So the idea is that one go around the table, he can get buffed by 1. Well, 1. Next time he goes back to your turn where he's going to attack again, he can deal 10 commander damage. So it kind of adds up over time. I really like Feast on the Fallen. I think it's a good card. Next card we have here is Fight or Flight. At the beginning of each opponent's combat phase, separate all creatures that player controls into 2 face-up piles. Only creatures in the pile of his or her choice may attack this turn. I think that's cool. I like that card. We have Haunted. That's an $8 card right now. Wow. Okay. We have Haunted of Night's Reach, which forces one person to discard a card equal to the number of shrines you control. We have the Monologue Tax, which I thought was one of the more expensive cards inside the deck, but it's not. That Honden. Dude, I got this Honden for like not that much money a long time ago. That's like barely a bulk rare. I probably got that card for 25 cents. Monologue Tax, $5. Whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, you create a treasure token. Revenge of Ravens. When somebody attacks you, they lose 1 life, you gain 1 life. I got this card for 25 cents too. We have the Sanctum of Stone Fangs. Each opponent loses X life, you gain X life, where X is the number of shrines you control. This shrine taps. This shrine costs 1 mana. I mean, it's nice to have there, but it's really just there as an extra shrine. Whenever someone attacks you with a Search the Premises, you investigate, so you create a token that you can sack for 2 to then draw a card. We have Subversion, which at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain life equal to that amount of life lost that way. So we got 14 enchantments inside the deck. A lot of them are really used to help to allow us to control combat. And then You know, we have more cards that give us the Monarch, which is going to force combat around the table, which I think works well. And some of the more important creatures, you know, we have this droning Bureaucrats. This card says that each creature with converted mana cost X can't attack or block this turn. So if your opponents have a specific creature that you want to not attack you, then you just tap this, pay mana, and now they can't. And he's a 1/4, so he's a decent blocker. This one says that whenever creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it attacks, tap target creature defending player controls. I think this scale guard inside this deck is actually kind of a bomb. Just because you can play elite scale guard and out of nowhere you can then buff all of your creatures with +1/+1 counters in the same turn with Shadrix, and then attack, which then forces you to tap down all of your opponent's creatures. So I think this card is low-key amazing inside this deck. We have Felisa. It's just a card that cares about counters. That's just going to help us draw cards. We have even more shrines, Goshen to have shared purpose. In draft, this card was absolutely phenomenal. If you do draft, this card is amazing. Grim Guardian, not too important. This Instigator over here, 39 cents. Pay 3 mana, discard a card from your hand. Creatures target player controls attack this turn if able. So once again, like controlling combat, forcing combat. We have the Markov Purifier. At the beginning of your end step, if you gain life this turn, you may pay 2. If you do a draw card. I think this card is amazing. It really adds up over time. Especially in a deck in colors where, you know, in white, where you're not really going to be drawing too many cards. It just helps out. And it's a nice life-linking creature, so by itself, it can help you gain life, which I think is cool. More Monarch. You know, we have this Saltfield Recluse. You can tap this creature to give target creature -2/-0 until the end of turn. If you give somebody a 2/1 flying creature, you know, just having the ability to tap this creature to give something -2, will just make them not want to attack you, just because of the fact that it'll have 0 power when it attacks you. And then looking at this, yeah, just more Monarch and more things that have to do with gaining life here or there. Yo, what's good, Charlie? Just going over this commander deck, brother. Hope you're having a good day. But yeah, more Monarch. Just, you know, I don't even think these cards are really that good enough to be kind of talking about. This is a relatively cheap commander deck. Off the top of my head, you know, I think this deck is really janky. So I don't know if there's too many cards that I'm going to be able to sit here and say that I can suggest that would be too great or powerful. So that's Shadrix, you know. Sometimes I build commander decks and I'm like, you know, sometimes I just want to sit down at a table and not really just have fun and not really think about winning the game too much. And I think that this commander deck, yeah, I think this deck is just fun, you know, like giving your opponents creatures or buffing them or forcing them to draw cards, I think is pretty cool. You know, I could probably add in cards that force your opponents to take damage when they draw cards, so they lose 2 life when I force them to draw a card. With Shadrix, I think that's something that could have been done. But, you know, I think it's, for what it is, and the game that I did have the opportunity to play in the short time I had, it worked out relatively well. And I was able to get a ton of mana rocks into play, which let me play my cards a little bit earlier than usual. So I had fun. Would I rate this deck? If I gave this deck a rating out of 10 in relation to its power level, I give it like a 7. If I say 6 is like a pre-con, 5 is like a bad pre-con, 6 is like a pretty good pre-con, I would give this like a 7. This deck has a strategy, you know, and if you play it, if you're smart with how you play the cards, like you can put yourself in a position to when it's 1v1 or it's if there's 3 players left in the game, if you are set in a good position at that point, you have a good chance of winning the game based off of your ability to control the board and control what's going on, which I think is fair to say. But like outside of that, if you're playing against like a combo deck or something, or people that don't really care about combat too much, you're just gonna have to focus on getting Shadrix as many +1/+1 counters as possible to then potentially commander damage people out of the game, and that's really the focus. Otherwise it does its job. But that's Shadrix.